The blistering sun hung high in the sky, casting an unforgiving light on the desolate landscape. In the heart of the wild, unforgiving desert, the air shimmered with the heat. A dry wind blew across the barren land, carrying the scent of dust and earth. The silence of the desert was thick, and it felt like the entire world had fallen asleep under the sun's harsh rays. A young girl, barely 7 or 8 years old, stood in the middle of the desert, her small frame trembling. She was alone except for her mother, who lay in the distance helplessly tied to a rock. The girl's dark eyes were wide with fear as she looked up at the sky, hoping for a miracle. But there was nothing. No one was there to hear her cries, no one to save them. Her mother's name was Maria, and she was a woman of great strength. But today, that strength was drained. She had always been the protector, the one who kept her daughter safe, the one who worked tirelessly to keep their little family afloat. But now she lay on the scorching ground, bound by thick ropes to a jagged rock, the cruel sun beating down on her. Her daughter, Sophia, had no idea how long they had been out there. Hours, maybe more. The harsh heat made it difficult to think clearly, and the dust in the air stung her eyes, making them water. Sophia knew she couldn't wait any longer. Her mother was in pain, and the more she thought about it, the more desperate she became. "Mommy, please wake up," Sophia whispered. But there was no response. Her mother's face was pale. Her body slumped against the rock, her hands tied tightly behind her. Maria had not moved for what felt like forever. Sophia's small hands gripped the hem of her mother's worn dress, her fingers trembling. She tugged at the fabric, trying to rouse her, but it was no use. The young girl had tried everything she could think of, calling for help, praying, begging, but no one had come. This was no ordinary day. It was a day that had started like any other, but quickly turned into something Sophia could never have imagined. Her mother had gone to town earlier in the day to sell what little they had, some vegetables, a few eggs, and a hand-sewn quilt. Sophia had stayed behind, playing in the dusty yard, waiting for her mother to return. But when Maria came back, she was not alone. She had been dragged back by the rancher, a man who owned most of the land in the area, a man whose name was whispered in fear among the townspeople. The rancher, an imposing figure, had grabbed her mother by the arm and forced her into the dirt. He accused her of stealing, of taking something from him, something she never had. Maria had protested, her voice shaking with anger and fear, but the rancher had not listened. He didn't care for her words. He didn't care for her pleas. To him, she was just another woman to be punished. So he tied her to a rock in the desert, leaving her under the hot sun to suffer as a reminder of what happened to those who crossed him. Sophia had tried to run after them, tried to beg the rancher to let her mother go, but he had only laughed at her. "Get back to where you belong, little girl. Your mother will learn the consequences of her actions." Now Sophia stood helplessly in the blistering heat, her throat dry and her heart heavy with fear. She could feel the weight of the silence around her. The sun had moved higher, and Maria's once lively face was now a pale mask, her skin slick with sweat. The ropes that held her mother were biting into her wrists, and Sophia could see the blood trickling down her arms. Sophia knew she couldn't let this happen. She had to do something. She couldn't just stand there and watch her mother suffer. But what could she do? She was just a little girl, no stronger than a breeze, no wiser than the desert sun. Her heart ached as she looked at her mother, the woman who had always been her protector. Maria had always been the one who had told Sophia that no matter what happened, they would always have each other. But now it seemed like the world had turned its back on them. With tears welling up in her eyes, Sophia took a deep breath. She wiped her face with her sleeve and turned away from her mother. She knew she had to find help. She couldn't do this alone. She ran as fast as her little legs could carry her, her bare feet kicking up dust as she searched the horizon, hoping to see someone, anyone, coming to their rescue. Her heart pounded as she scanned the endless expanse of the desert, but there was no one. Not a single soul in sight. The rancher had made sure of that. The town was miles away, and there were no other farms or ranches nearby. It felt like the world had swallowed them whole. Sophia slowed to a stop, her chest rising and falling with the effort. She didn't know where to go or what to do. Her mind raced as she thought of every possible option, every possible way she could save her mother. But the sun, the heat, and the isolation of the desert made her feel like a small ant in an endless desert. But then she remembered something. Her mother had once told her about the old rancher who lived on the far side of the hills. He was known to be kind, a man who took in lost children and cared for them when they had no one else. Sophia didn't know much about him, but if there was any chance that he might help, she had to try. With renewed determination, Sophia turned back and ran toward the hills, the distant silhouette of the rancher's homestead in her mind. She couldn't waste any more time. Her mother needed her. The journey was long, and Sophia felt the weight of the heat pressing down on her, the dust clogging her throat. But she kept running, her legs aching, her body covered in sweat. She didn't stop, even as the day stretched on and the sun began to dip lower in the sky. Finally, just when Sophia felt like she couldn't go any farther, she saw it. The ranch house perched atop the hills. She could hardly believe her eyes. She had made it. She had found the place where she might find help. Sophia staggered up to the house, her heart pounding in her chest. She knocked on the door, her hands shaking with fear and exhaustion. The door creaked open and a tall man with rough hands and a weathered face appeared in the doorway. "What do you want, little one?" he asked, his voice rough but kind. Through her tears and gasps for breath, Sophia managed to tell him everything. The rancher, her mother, the desert. The man listened carefully, his brow furrowing with concern. Without a word, he turned and grabbed his rifle, slinging it over his shoulder. "Show me where she is," he said. Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with hope. She turned and led the way back toward the desert, the man following her every step of the way. As they walked, Sophia felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. There was hope. And for the first time since her mother had been taken, she could breathe again. The desert stretched out before them, but this time it didn't seem so empty. The rancher was here. He would help, and together they would save her mother. The sun was beginning to set when Sophia and the rancher finally made it back to the place where her mother had been left to suffer. The air had started to cool slightly, but the desert still held on to its heat, making every step feel like a struggle. The tall man, with his rough features and steady stride, never once looked tired. Sophia felt both relieved and anxious as they approached the spot where her mother was tied. The sight of her mother lying there, still bound to the rock, made Sophia's heart ache with pain. Her mother's once beautiful face was now pale and worn, and her clothes were soaked with sweat. Sophia's throat tightened and she ran to her side, kneeling beside her mother's body. "Mommy, I'm here," Sophia cried, shaking her gently. Her mother didn't respond right away, but slowly she blinked her eyes open. Sophia's face lit up, and tears of relief poured down her cheeks. Maria's eyes slowly focused, and she looked at Sophia with a weak smile. "Sophia, you came back. I found him," Sophia exclaimed, pointing at the rancher. "He's going to help us, Mommy." Maria's gaze moved to the tall man who had arrived with Sophia, his eyes hard but full of compassion. He was standing a few steps away, his rifle now resting on his shoulder. He gave her a slight nod but didn't say a word. He had been watching the scene carefully, taking in everything with a quiet determination. Maria, still exhausted and too weak to speak much, nodded slowly. She had been through so much already, but seeing her daughter safe and seeing this stranger here, someone who didn't turn his back on them, was a sign of hope. "I'm going to untie you." "Ma'am," the rancher said, his voice steady and calm, though there was a flicker of anger in his eyes. He stepped forward, and Sophia watched in awe as the man began to cut the ropes that had been cruelly binding Maria to the rock. The ropes had cut into her skin, leaving red marks that would take days to heal. Sophia helped hold her mother steady, making sure she didn't fall as the rancher worked. When the last rope fell away, Maria slumped forward slightly, but Sophia was quick to catch her. She held on to her mother tightly, not wanting to let go. The rancher stepped back, giving them some space. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice softer now. Maria's face was pale, but she managed to nod, though it was clear she was still weak. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," the rancher replied. "No one should be treated like that, not in this world." He seemed to be speaking more to himself than to anyone else, and Sophia wondered what had made this man so kind, so willing to help. She had heard stories of ranchers in the area, tough, rough men who cared only for themselves. But this man, he was different. There was something in the way he looked at them that spoke of empathy, of understanding. Sophia's heart swelled with gratitude, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. "You're a good man," she said simply. The rancher didn't reply right away. Instead, he looked off into the distance, his jaw tightening as if he was wrestling with something inside. He had seen too much cruelty in his life. He had been a part of it, perhaps, but in that moment, standing there with Maria and Sophia, something inside of him had changed. He couldn't stand by and do nothing. He couldn't ignore the injustice that had been done to them. Maria, still weak, leaned on Sophia as the girl helped her stand. The rancher gave them both a gentle look before turning toward the horizon, his hand on his rifle, as if already preparing to confront the man who had put Maria through this. Sophia could feel the tension in the air, but she also felt something else, something more powerful. She felt like for the first time in her life they had a chance, a real chance. "We need to get out of here," Maria whispered to Sophia. She was still shaky, but her voice held more strength now. "We can't stay here. The rancher won't stop until he gets what he wants." Sophia looked up at the rancher. He was already moving in the direction of the distant ranch, his footsteps purposeful. "He's right. We need to leave, Mommy. He'll keep us safe." The rancher had made it clear that he was not afraid to stand up to the man who had hurt them. It was like something in him had been awakened by the injustice he had witnessed. He wasn't going to let this go. He wasn't going to let the cruelty continue. Maria gave Sophia a small nod and they followed the rancher. As they walked, Sophia glanced up at him, her small steps quickening to match his. "Thank you for helping us," she said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "We didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't think anyone would care." The rancher looked down at her for a moment and Sophia saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something that made her feel like she had known him forever. It was as if he had always been there, watching over them from afar. Perhaps he had seen enough suffering to know when it was time to step in. "We all need someone to care," he said simply. "That's what makes us human." Sophia smiled again, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't fully understand what the rancher meant, but she felt his words in her heart. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her, as if she could finally breathe again. The walk back to the ranch felt different now. The air was still hot, the ground still hard, but it no longer seemed so lonely. Sophia, her mother, and the rancher walked side by side, a silent bond forming between them as they moved closer to safety. When they reached the ranch, Sophia's heart pounded with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. She knew they had made it this far, but the real challenge was about to begin. The rancher had promised to stand by them, but Sophia wasn't sure if he truly knew what he was up against. She had seen the way the other ranchers treated people like her mother, like they were nothing. As they entered the ranch, the rancher's eyes scanned the area, his posture tense, ready for whatever was coming next. Sophia stayed close to her mother, not letting go of her hand for a second. They were safe for now, but the danger wasn't over. The rancher had promised them protection, but would he be able to keep that promise? Maria, too, felt the uncertainty of what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while she had hope. She had Sophia, and she had this man, this stranger, who had offered them something she thought was lost forever: compassion. The rancher led them to a small, simple cabin on the outskirts of the ranch. It was far from luxurious, but it was safe. He gestured for them to enter. "You'll be all right here for the night. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do." Sophia nodded, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. She helped her mother sit down on the bed, and they both leaned back against the wall, safe for the moment. The rancher stood in the doorway for a while, watching them before he turned to leave. Before he left, he looked back one last time. "I'll keep my word. You're safe now." And with that, he walked into the night, leaving the two women in the quiet warmth of the cabin. Sophia lay down beside her mother, her head on the pillow. As her mother's soft breathing filled the room, Sophia closed her eyes, a peacefulness settling over her. For the first time, she truly believed that things would get better. The desert night stretched out before them, but within the walls of that small cabin, there was safety, and with it, a glimmer of hope.